So today we'll be talking about film emulation, why people use it, and the easiest way I found to apply it. So what is film emulation? Film emulation uses digital tools and techniques to create an image that looks like it was shot on film. And these effects can be really tricky to apply for most people unless you're a professional colorist or have been editing for a very long time. So when Dehancer reached out to me about doing a review on this product, I saw it as a win-win. Now, why do people use film emulation? There are several reasons why someone would want to use a film look in today's digital landscape. Some people really prefer the look of film over any digital content that they see. Others have a favorite movie that was shot on a specific film stock that they want to try to recreate or emulate.
Doctor, Django, how the hell are you?
And others, they just want to add a little bit of vintage charm to their videos. Whatever the reason, film emulation is a very powerful tool that I'll be showing you how to use in DaVinci Resolve with Dehancer. Full disclosure, Dehancer reached out to me to do this review. They didn't give me any money to do it. They haven't seen the video. I do get 10% if you use the promo code URVINA, that's URVINA. When you check out, you'll also get 10% off. So if you do end up purchasing this, you know what to do. Now, at the time of filming this video, I've had Dehancer for about 3 weeks and I've tested it on a multitude of different codecs from different cameras. And I gotta say, the thing that stands out to me the most is the ease of use. Now, I got it for DaVinci Resolve because that's my editor of choice. It also comes for Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro, which I think would actually benefit a little bit more from this product because, let's face it, DaVinci just has better color options and it's a lot easier to attain these looks within DaVinci Resolve than it is the other two platforms. And today I want to give a general overview of what this is. I'm not going to go too in depth on how to edit with it, but I want you to get an understanding of what the product is, how to use it in a simple way, and whether it's right for you or not. Now, once you either import your clips if you're testing this out or if you have your final edit completed, head over to the color page. So real quick, I'm in the middle of editing and I realized that you don't even really have to go to the color tab to do this. You can do this in the edit tab, but I had assumed you had to go to the color tab because it's the color setting, but you could do it in the edit tab. So there you go. On the right side of the page, you'll see library. And if you scroll down just a little bit under film emulations, you'll see Dehancer Pro 7 point, whichever Pro version that you're running at the time. Drag that onto the node and we're already ready to emulate. Now, when you add this effect to the color node, it'll automatically apply a film stock over Rec 709 by default. So if you are using a log footage, on the right side of the screen, you can go up to where it says camera and choose the camera that you're using from a multitude of brands. And then there's different log profiles within each camera brand. They're even as up to date as Apple Log with this, so knowing that you're getting regular updates is kind of a good thing to have in the back of your mind when you're using this. So on this first clip I have here, I used the Canon R6 and I was shooting C-Log 3, so we'll select those. Right below that, in the input tab, you'll see exposure compensation, temperature compensation, tint compensation, defringe, and defringe radius for those chromatic aberrations if they are there in your footage. Below that, you'll get into your film developer section where you can boost the contrast, correct your gamma, see your color separation and color boost settings. Now, I don't use these settings too often, but they are nice to have. In the next menu, we're getting more into the fun stuff. Here you can select your film profile, and Dehancer has provided 64 profiles for them. So it's really fun to see what different film looks look like on whatever footage that you're working on. Below that, you'll see your push-pull setting, which lets you dial in your contrast within the scene itself. Play with that a little bit, you'll kind of see some of the lighting change in front of you, behind you. It's kind of a cool setting. But once you've selected your profile and you want to move on, scrolling down, you have film compression. Now, what this allows you to do is bring you to a film-like compressed tonal range. And what that essentially is doing is taking your highlights and bringing them down while not affecting your midtones or shadows. You can tweak this anywhere, but I generally leave it alone unless there's some real clipping issues on my clips. Then I'll go in there, make some adjustments, and move on from there. Just below that, we have the expand setting, which really lets you dial in your highlights and your shadows within the scene. I really enjoy using this tool to get that proper exposure and make sure there's no light sources clipping within the scene. Under the expand tool, you have the print tool. And you may be wondering what this is because we're dealing with digital media and not film. Printing allows the negative of the film to be printed onto a positive so you can project it, say, in a theater or scan it for digital uses. Depending on what the film is printed on, you can find different characteristics that really dial in a look. Below print, you have your color head, and what this allows you to do is adjust your tint and your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows. There's also a setting to preserve your exposure, and you can adjust the impact of the setting on that bottom dial. So if you want a colored look, this is the spot where you want to go. I'm going to leave it alone for this demonstration. Moving down to the next control, this will probably be a favorite of a lot of you. This is the grain control. Now, grain is one thing that Dehancer does really well. Now, I've used a bunch of grain plugins in the past or noise plugins, and a lot of them, they tend to overdo it or underdo it, or the adjustment's just not there. With Dehancer, I've noticed that it applies to the scene really well. It's really smooth, looks really natural, and there are a lot of options for you to choose from. What they've done is they've given you multiple ISOs for multiple film sizes, and if you ask me, Adding the right amount of grain can really convince the viewer that this is shot on film rather than digital, because digital is just so sharp. You can also select a custom setting so where you can control the size of the grain, the amount, whether it's applied in the highlights, midtones, or shadows. And there's also an image resolution setting that really dehances the image. You can adjust your chroma settings and whether or not you want a positive or negative film look for it, and whether you want it to look more analog or more like digital noise. And like I said, I think the Dehancer grain is really natural looking, really gives you that good film emulation. And for this demonstration, let's just bump it all the way up. Moving on, we get into halation. And what halation is it's a visual effect that gives a reddish-orange glow around highlights, especially in overexposed areas. Now this happens from light passing through the RGB layers of the film and hitting the anti-halation film. Once it hits the anti-halation film, it bounces back, and you get that reddish-orange glow around your highlights in your video. Now if we didn't have the anti-halation, it would hit the metal components within the camera, it would bounce all over the place, and everything would be kind of glowy and it just wouldn't really look that good. And while this is very similar to bloom, it is not bloom. But bloom is our next effect. Now bloom is an effect that gives highlights that subtle glow, not the reddish orange, and it's caused more by poor coating on a lens or an optical imperfection rather than light reflecting off the film like halation. In the digital world, if we want to get some more bloom, generally we'll use a Pro Mist filter. I had one sitting around here. I dropped it. See how dreamy and glowy it looks? Even I look a little glowy with this thing, you know? That's bloom. So clearly I use Pro Mist filters myself, so I do like a little bit of bloom in there, you know what I'm saying? But this is being edited with Dehancer and graded with Dehancer, so I don't really need the Pro Mist filter, and yeah, so that's gone now. Moving on. Next on the list, we have film damage, and what this is it is emulating damaged film.
Duh.
So say your physical film got a scratch on it, or a hair, or just a little chunk, just a little baby chunk ripped out of it. This is what film damage looks like. You've seen it in plenty of vintage movies. There's no way really to get rid of it back in the day. And you more commonly see this on smaller film stocks because the smaller the film stock, the bigger the imperfection looks. So when you're selecting through the menus, you can select between 8mm and 65mm, just like with the film grain. 8mm, you'll see the damage more. 65, you'll see it less, but it'll still be pretty subtle on there. So if you're making an old Western movie and you're, you know, Wile E. Coyote-ing it out.
Wile E. Coyote.
This is good. So if you've ever watched an old movie where you kind of see the exposure do a little jump, just a little jump, that's called a film breaths. And just like a lot of the other settings, we have the ability to select the different size of film. And like a lot of the other films, it is more prevalent on the 8mm size than it is the larger film sizes. Now, gate weave is an effect to where you have your film on a track and maybe one of the track teeth is off, or there's something off about the spindle or whatever it may be, but you notice the film kind of just shift a little bit. Now, this is pretty common in film projectors or film cameras in the digital age. That's why it's on the plugin. The Overscan setting gives us that classic film strip that we're all accustomed to seeing in a lot of the iMovie stuff, and basically anything that wants to emulate film without actually emulating film, that just give you the little strip and send you on your way. That's what Overscan does. Moving down from that, you have Vignette, or Vin-Getty, as I used to say. We're not going to talk about that. Here you can lighten or darken the edges of your video, as well as change the aspect ratio of the vignette to more of an oval shape and vertically or more horizontal, whichever way you want to do it. It's pretty straightforward, and it adds a little subtle effect to your film emulation. Moving down to monitor, there's just two check marks here that you can check. One is going to give you false colors, and one is going to show you where you're clipping both bright and dark, so you can adjust your exposure. Output is where you can adjust the intensity of the entire profile that is applied. So if you want to crank everything up and bring it all the way down there, you can. I don't know why you would. I would just adjust everything up in the other menus, but feel free to do so. So if you really like what you put together and you have a lot of the same images, like if you have a talking head shot like this, and you're going to keep it consistent, you want to export that LUT so you can do it the same thing over and over and over again. It really gives you a chance to do it. You can do a 17 cube LUT or a 33. I'd go for the 33. Why not? It's just more data for the computer to have. Either way, it's a cool tool to have, and it's cool to be able to save a setting and come back to it later. Finally, down in the options tab, you have the ability to change the quality settings so you can render a lot faster. Now, Dehancer is a pretty beefy plugin. I do have an M1 Max with 64 gigs of RAM, so it runs pretty smooth on my computer. If I have it playing in the background and I go to edit a setting, then it'll get jittery and kind of bog down a little bit. But if I stop it, change the setting, and hit play again, and give it like a half a second to apply the new setting, it does just fine. So if you're running a slower rig or an older rig, you might run into some performance issues here. I've seen some different videos saying that. In my experience with the M1 Max and 64 gigs of RAM, it actually runs really smooth. Now, I haven't experienced this in any of the other NLEs like Final Cut or Premiere. I'm assuming Premiere will crash at least once.
You're not wrong.
And Final Cut will probably run pretty smooth because Apple's pretty good at that. You also have the option to view your license info, check for any profile updates or additional profiles. It'll open up a download window to get any updates that Dehancer might have. Below that, you can disable everything so you can just start over. Now with these next few clips, I've gone through and I've just applied different settings just to give you some different examples of what it'll look like and give you an idea of what it looks like in a couple different codecs, or if you're applying it to Rec 709. Honestly, it's all pretty much the same. It all does a really good job of giving you that film emulation. I really haven't ran into any issues here with any of these clips being funky looking or anything like that. As long as you select the correct input source, the plugin really does a good job at color correcting and getting you to the point to where you really just got to fine tune your adjustments that you want to make it your own. Overall, I do think Dehancer is a great plugin. I think the $449 can be a bit steep for some people, but if you're in a video creation and you have the money to do so, I don't see why you wouldn't get it, because being able to get to that film look without doing a super edit is pretty valuable. Now, you can get a lot of these features with Dehancer Lite at $199, but you'll be missing stuff like the halation feature and a couple more. And you can piecemeal those together on the website, but if you want to add a couple to that, you're already at the $449 essentially, so you might as well buy the whole package. If you wanted to do, say, just grain or halation or bloom, you can buy those separately at $99 a piece. You can add those onto the Lite or just buy them as their own plugins. Now, another cool thing that Dehancer has is their iOS app. You can apply the film stocks, you can do basic exposure correction, and you can also apply this to photos and videos within the app. Now, I have an iPhone 15 Pro, and when I was using the app to apply an effect to a longer video that was probably about 45 seconds, I noticed it does get pretty boggy, and that's with the latest iPhone. But if you're using it for shorter clips or photos, especially photos look great within this app. I think it's a good buy. Now, the app is available via subscription. There are 3 tiers within that subscription. There's a weekly, a monthly, and an annual. The annual is going to give you your best bang for your buck at $89.99. You can do the monthly at $9.99 or weekly at $5.99 if you want to just try it out. And for $9 a month, which most people will gravitate towards, I don't think it's that bad. The Dehancer team has done a great job at putting together solid products with this plugin and the app. And I would recommend it to anyone who can afford it, that's serious about their video editing. I just think it's a great tool to have, and I'm excited to see what I can do with it in the future. So to see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.